I'm interviewing the Reverend Harry Lucas, who was one of the instigators of the new building for the Margaret River Uniting Church, which was a few years ago now. So I'd like to ask you a number of questions, Harry, about that time. Um, Firstly, just what are some of your memories of that time when the church, when you were planning and when you were starting to build it? Do you have any specific memories?
I think the main one was that we recognised that ownership of the new location and building was essential if we were going to get anywhere, because there was a lot of emotional investment in the old building. And there were some folks who were very reluctant to move over to the other side of town. So we spent about 6 months doing some group work, talking about it, and by and large we started with all the congregation saying yes.
So what precipitated you thinking about a new building?
Our size. The old building was too small for the congregation. And when we had anything that was rather special, it was overflowed to people standing outside, and that wasn't much chop.
So what particular visions did you have when you were thinking about the new building, and what sort of vision went into the planning?
Well, we, following on from ownership of the new change, we believe that the congregation ought to have as much input into what sort of thing we needed as possible. So we had a series of groups, and we asked, the first question was, what sort of presence does the Uniting Church need to have in Margaret River? And some people came up with various ideas. Everyone came up with the idea of the building. So we said, what sort of a space do we need to provide? Or what sort of activities are we going to be involved in so that we can provide space for that? And we spent quite a few months on that activity. Then we looked at the types of building we wanted, and because the ground that we were going to build on was quite shifty, and it needed to be taken into consideration when we put anything on that particular block.
Can you tell me any of the stories about what was happening while it was actually being built, or even while it was in the planning stage? Were there particular incidences you remember?
Well, I think the main thing was to get the Shire Council
Really?
to move. At that time, it wasn't very easy, but I spent a bit of time doing a bit of background work.
Was there some hesitancy on their part?
Oh, planning was a problem. They didn't have sufficient staff, and the staff they did have were not altogether excited in supporting the idea of the church building.
Do you remember when it was being built, Harry?
Yes.
Do you remember any incidences from that time?
Well, first of all, the congregation decided that they wanted me to manage the project. So then we needed to look at what our finances were, and we applied to the synod to sell the present property, and their permission was only to sell the block as it was, not to subdivide. I have a sneaking suspicion that they thought that we couldn't manage subdivision. But locally we said, well, up yours, mate, we'll go for subdivision, so we did so. We could get 300,000 for it as a block, and when we subdivided, and we got that through various ways, nothing untoward, but we did do very well. We ultimately got 525. That put us on the road to a pretty closely building without too much debt. I think we came out with a $65,000 debt.
What was the reason for actually choosing that particular site, where it is now?
Well, that was new development. It was one of the few places where we had multiplicity of blocks that could be put together on which to build the church building. That was in the early stages of the development of that eastern side of Margaret River. And the developer was very, very cooperative, and gave us an extra block over and above the 4 blocks that we got.
Wow.
So we bought for those 5 blocks, cost us 160,000.
When you were talking with people and when you were planning and all that, what comes to mind when people were thinking about the vision of this new church on this new block in terms of what the possibilities were?
Well, I think the congregation was part and parcel of the vision of the development of Margaret River, because it was on the cusp of the eastern side was just being developed then at that particular time. And I think they saw the church as being able to be involved with the community far more closely than it had been. And they also felt that the provision of spaces to do that was pretty important. They couldn't do it with the other centre, because the shire would then insist, if we wanted to add a certain number of parking bays for the increase, and we couldn't have fitted any more on, so it was an impossible block on which to build.
Are there any specific memories that come back to you when you think about that task and the building and all that went on?
I think the amazing thing was that they trusted me.
That's good to hear.
Harry, who came up with the design of the building?
We had a competition, if you like, within the congregation, and was open to any member of the congregation to submit a ground plan that would probably cater for the type of activities that we wanted to be involved in. And my wife Lois won the competition. I had nothing to do with it.
From
congregation voted on all the submissions, and it was her submission that won the design.
That must be a great memory to have when you go there.
Absolutely.
So a moment of joy, was that the day of the opening?
Yes, I think. I certainly think we had people there who were sort of connected with us in some way, but never been to worship with us, and the place was packed out actually. We had, I think the building, if I remember correctly, could house 130. I think that's the maximum. We had about 180 there.
Wow, that's good. Nothing like pushing the boundaries, eh? Behind it all, Harry, did you have something that was there that if somebody said, "Why are you here?" what would you say?
I think probably historically we'd say, well, we've always been there for quite some time, but it's what presence would we be here in that particular time, at that particular moment in time, was another question altogether. And the other question, of course, was what does it mean to be the church, rather than just to exist as some palatial or building that people could say that's the Uniting Church. And I think we got pretty close to being that. I think with the development and outreach of the congregation, it gave us a place within the community that I think is still there.
Let me ask you this question then. If you have an ongoing hope for the church, and particularly the church in Margaret River, what would it be?
That it continued to be the presence of the Christ in the community. Mm-hmm. And I think there were many good relationships developed, particularly with the play groups, and also developed a lot of people's skills in the congregation that they didn't realise they had.
Well, it just leaves me finally to say a big thank you to you, not only for this little conversation, but really, Harry, your part in that whole process was quite significant and allows the church to be that presence where it is today. So thank you, mate.
Thank you very much.
Yeah,
thanks for asking me to be involved.
Yeah, thanks, Harry. Much appreciated.